This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast coming in Monday afternoon. It's July 1st and the NBA offseason is underway. So I kind of think Britt and I were talking about this before we got on. Our loose plan is just to kind of bounce around, round up what the Wolves have been up to. Obviously, the main thing thus far in the offseason was the draft. We learned, kind of given their luxury tax restrictions, that it was going to be the draft was going to be their main sort of building block for adjusting the roster this summer, or because they probably aren't going to trade one of their main pieces. Britt, I want to talk to you about Dillingham and Shannon and just kind of that sort of philosophy that Tim Connelly and company put place to build out this roster. But, you know, there's a bunch of deals. Like, our phones are blowing up. There's a bunch of off-season stuff going on right now around the Wolves who are making moves and stuff. And I was just kind of, scrolling through it, looking at it this morning. I was looking at the top of the West, like the Wolves sort of contemporaries, right? At least of a season ago, Oklahoma City, Denver, Dallas, and the Clippers.
Oklahoma City has, as usual, really done well.
I mean, that one, it's just like you ever played a board game with somebody who's just really, really good at that board game, and you're like, all right, cool. You beat me in Settlers of Catan. Like, that is,
what do you know? The perfect center for that team.
Yeah. I mean, the Caruso for Giddey swap. I probably am even missing things here, but I was going through Caruso for Giddey swap, right? I think we saw how Giddey impacted them. Hartenstein, I mean, that's a big number. 3 years, $87 million, but they got the space to do it because they got all these guys on little contracts. Isaiah Joe signed 4 years, $48 million today. Aaron Wiggins, 5 years, $47. Dort is on a contract like that. Kenrich Williams, plus Chet, Jalen Williams, Jalen Williams,
are all rookie deals, right?
Yeah, still on rookie deals. So they're the one team, I think, right at the top who we go, all right, that's
a good team.
As expected. It's a good team and it's getting better, but Denver loses KCP. To Orlando. Dallas loses Derrick Jones Jr., who was at least a really big piece
Clippers,
for them last year. I guess he goes to the Clippers. Obviously, the Clippers lose Paul George. I don't know if the Pelicans are a contemporary exactly, but they get DeJounte Murray. How are you thinking about the Wolves right now within the context of the top of the West?
I think that the Wolves can only take care of their own business, obviously. And I think that what they've done has been a pretty strong offseason simply because they are building with youth, which means that they have a pretty good insurance policy. I think that both the guys who got drafted work well if they have to blow everything up. I mean, you never want to be like, all right, what's the worst case scenario? But the worst case scenario has become a lot more pleasant, I think, with Dillingham and Shannon on the roster and knowing that the way that Nas and Ant and Jade McDaniels play. And I mean, if it goes to that, you're punting a lot of salary. I mean, it'd be like a Brooklyn cleanse, it would really be something where I guess what I'm saying is the Wolves, as Tim Connelly reminds us fairly frequently, was a Final Four team, one of the two conference finalists in the West, and as a result deserve to be seriously considered contenders in the West. So I guess what I would say is that they have a core that is already strong. They've had a taste of what success is. And so what plagued them last year? Well, I mean, offense was kind of sluggish at times, scoring off the bench. That theoretically is addressed. I have my doubts, quite frankly, about Dillingham's ability to be such a plug-and-play guy at the age of 19, weighing less than 165 pounds. But I do get the plan, and I think the plan is frankly better than getting a $5 million discount free agent from another team,
Yeah, it's like, it's definitely a very good plan given the limitations of what the Wolves had. It's the only plan to inject talent into the team, but talent at 19 is not necessarily immediately productive. And that's just particularly at the point guard position, particularly being small, but it works sometimes, right? Like there are examples of guys being able to come in and play right away. I think it helps.
Williams.
Yeah, sure. When you're not put into a situation immediately where you're necessarily like overtaxed, like Dillingham's obviously not going to start, right? There's a lot of typically like the 8th overall pick. I'm off the top of my head, I can't think of it, but a lot of those guys are just like, okay, you're the starting small forward for the Wizards immediately. And that with, the guy I've been thinking about a lot in thinking about Dillingham is Zach LaVine. And obviously the size comparison doesn't work there. There's different athletic sort of composites, but he comes in super raw, obviously with some explosiveness. And then he's kind of developed into this player who's an all offense, no defense sort of guy. And it's interesting, like Zach, when he was in Minnesota, right, he got the opportunity to come in, he was the 13th pick, whatever, and play right away. And bit of a nightmare in that, but developed into one of the best bucket getters off the bench in the league. I think that's my sort of optimistic view of what Dillingham kind of becomes. And I know LaVine wasn't exactly your guy back in the day, but is that
I think it's ironic because throwing LaVine into copious point guard minutes was a tanking strategy for the Wolves. That's pretty much how Flip got Cat. I mean, it was one of those things where playing LaVine and Wiggins together was a purposeful way to lose because Zach LaVine was way out of his depth as a ball creator. But the argument was, even if he wasn't going to be a career point guard, he was going to be a guy who would learn how to play make because of all this time. Well, as it turns out, some guys just have a limited ceiling in terms of what they can do. I mean, I remember Al Jefferson, all the attempts to turn him into a decent defender, and he just wasn't capable of it. And Zach LaVine, I believe, the reason I maybe, even though I'm not a huge proponent of the kind of upside that Dillingham is being heralded as by the brass right now, I think he may be a better two-way player than Zach LaVine because Zach LaVine just has a lot of trouble playing defense. And maybe this guy does too. I mean, I don't want to think he's the second coming of Trae Young, but the dimensions are there. And you can see sometimes when Trae Young wants to play defense, he just gets over, he gets.
What would be awesome on this Timberwolves team that was number 1 in defense and number 17 in offense last year? The second coming of Trae Young. That's like that.
Yeah,
that's
you're probably right. You're probably right.
I mean, you and I generally are. Maybe it's just from so many years of covering a lot of Wolves players who have leaned a lot more offense than defense. There's just that sort of annoyance with that style of player, but we do need to look at what this team is, man. And they honestly need that bucket more than they obviously significantly more than they need defense. And what better context to kind of protect that than Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels and the rest of the number 1 defense.
Well, and you do emphasize the number 1 defense, and I agree with that. I think one of the worries I have, let's say you lose Slow-Mo and you lose Monte Morris. Those are 2 very, very good on-ball defenders. And Nas, as good as he is.
Let's not put Monte in Slow-Mo's category.
I really like Monte.
Okay, yeah. I'm not saying Monte was a bad defender, but Slow-Mo is a guard.
He's a very good defender.
Yes.
But Monte Morris is really, really good at negotiating and blowing up picks. And he's actually, I think he is. I think if he had been given consistent minutes at that slot, anyway, it's a debate that is moot point now, I think, because I don't think he's coming back. But
do you remember when the Wolves traded for Monte? it was kind of the same thing where it was like, okay, you're not getting much defense from this guy, but he's going to be able to run your second unit and stuff like that. And we were both struck by how good Monte's defense was, or better than the perception coming in.
Agreed.
And I wonder if that's part of like, it's just an environment, this Rudy Gobert, Chris Finch defense, that it's just the expectation. It's not one of those teams like the 2019-20 Timberwolves where you can just kind of get away with falling asleep constantly.
Right.
I picture Andrew Wiggins, like quote unquote, guarding a guy in the corner. Right. That never happened anymore. There was as Finch would always say, Gobert set a defensive culture in Minnesota, and everybody who played on the Wolves last season, including guys like Karl Anthony Towns and Naz Reid, who were not viewed as good defenders, guarded all year.
Absolutely.
And I think that's huge for Dillingham. He might be like a 1 out of 10 in terms of defensive talent at 19 years old, given that, but he's probably going to give you his 1. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because he's playing for the Wolves. So I think it just, from a context of the salary cap and a context of what this team needs and doesn't need, it's hard for me to have any problem with the thesis of the move.
And I will say where I think I was a little put off, and doubting Tim Connelly is not a safe occupation, as we've learned by doubting the Gobert trade in year 2. I didn't doubt it in year 1, but I really was kind of on the fence the whole time. I think his blanket praise of Dillingham is in part to generate a renewed commitment by the ownership, the fan base, and the roster. I think it is a pump-up call to arms. Hey, we got somebody. This guy is going to really help us. And it's a way to motivate as much as it is fact.
Yeah, I like that.
And so, I mean, that's the only way I can look at it. The guy is 6'1", 19 years old and 162 pounds. And I don't care how competitive you are. I mean, how much, what's the height and weight of that Alvarado in New Orleans? I mean, that's a guy, you get a guy like that who's a Tiger. He may be like 180. I don't know what he is, to be honest. For all I know, he's 200 or so. But
he probably not, because he's like 5'8".
Yeah,
I think
so. There's a guy.
Yeah.
There are ways you can find guys like that, but it'll be interesting because Connelly did very boldly say,
that's what I was going to say,
that this guy can play defense and will play defense. We're going to challenge him to play defense. I used the word protect, and he really took it personally. We're not going to protect that guy on defense. We're going to, basically throw him in the deep end and let him go. So let's say he knows more than I do about basketball. What a concept. It may be that the Wolves landed like a super incredibly underrated guy with the 8th pick. I mean, Connelly called him the best shot creator and the most talented player in the draft. He called him those things.
How much have you gotten a chance to watch some of it? I
think that what he reminds me of weirdly is kind of a miniature Ant.
Yeah.
A guy who has a lot of ability.
To Zach LaVine, Trae Young, and Anthony Edwards. Things are looking good.
Well, I mean, those are the upside comparisons,
Yeah. No, but go on. Like how so?
I just think that if he does have the capability to be, from what I've seen, obviously I try to go beyond the, the highlights and everything. Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned, the game, the Gonzaga game where they went at him. So I looked at that for a minute. And, college is so hard because the rotations are so weird. Calipari used him in such a weird way that I really don't know
I know that was funny with the Gonzaga game, right? I'm like, is he getting benched or does he just not play? Like, I needed to watch like 10 more games. I guess what we should contextualize to the listeners is I asked of like, what would be a good example of seeing, because, we can all watch the highlights of Dillingham or rip through the clips. And maybe I'll start there first. It's always interesting, kind of reading about what a player is and isn't. And then yourself
watching it.
And doing your own sort of watch of it. And I'll start with the positive thing of my perception versus the others is, he's just labeled as like buckets and that's it, like downhill, pull up, whatever. But watching it, like there's a lot more, at least at the college level, playmaking chops. Like
he's got a really good hook skip pass.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, that thing where he kind of whips it over his head.
I mean, they blitzed him every time, or not every, I mean, often in pick and
right.
roll. And that's
he makes them pay. Right.
Do you remember like, the one year when the Wolves always blitzed in pick and roll, and it was those guys like Trae Young that would, and like Darius Garland, where they would kind of like drag, like, okay, Cat, you're blitzing, like, and you're putting 2 on me. Well, I'm going to drag you all the way to the far right sideline and then sling it back over to the
John
top.
Collins. Here we go.
Yeah,
bing, bing,
wide
bing,
open.
Bing, bing. Right.
Yeah. And Dillingham, again, at least at the college level, was doing that consistently. And just reading about him, you'd think he's nothing but a shooter, ball hog, whatever, in a good way. But like there was more of that there. Then, the other side, the negative stuff is defensively. And, even in a college game against Gonzaga, they were doing the thing like it's the NBA playoffs when they're like,
boom,
okay, Dillingham is guarding you. You get up here for this screen.
Right.
And then Dillingham's guarding him. And then they would like set another. He would get crushed on screens all the time.
Right.
That reminded me of Rookie Ant. Like it was a zero navigation against ball screens where you just would remember when Ant was like, man, screens are tough in the NBA. These dudes are big. That's what it looked like when Dillingham was was defending. And, that's, so I say that to me, and I think there's more to the playmaking than maybe the perception. And then, the defense is going to be, to put it kindly, like a work in progress.
Well, I mean, if Ant is indeed 225 pounds, you're talking 60 pounds of mostly muscle. I mean, Ant has that advantage. And one of the things that Ant does do pretty well when he has a mind to is either has the bulk to go under, over, or through screens without a lot of interference. If you're 165 pounds and you're trying to go under a screen, it doesn't take much for another guy to pick you off there too.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, the lack of heft on an NBA court is significant. I mean, it's not something, even a guy 180 pounds, I mean, that's what was so impressive, to take a little tangent for a second. Jaden McDaniels is a 185-pound rookie and second-year person, was an extraordinary defender because he was such a spider, such an octopus in the way he played.
I mean, Nikhil too. Nikhil's tall, but Nikhil can't be 200 pounds.
No, you're right. And he's like a blade. What he does is he gets between. I've never seen any. Well, no, I have seen, but very few players can slip through a screen as well as Nah can. And maybe Nah can teach him that. I mean, he's got Mike Conley, Nah, and Ant. That's a pretty great
That's what I'm talking about. The context, like what better context to put in poor man's Trae Young? Like it, both sides of the ball. What better context?
You're right.
That's a huge win. Let me grab we'll grab our first break here. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. Have you been drinking any Falling Knife this summer, Britt?
I have.
I had one the other day. It is like we both like the verbal
tip is my favorite. I like Hidden Temple, which is hard to find lately, to be honest with you. I don't know. Maybe
you got to get into the tap room, man. go buy them from.
Is it there?
Yeah. No, they can sell cans from the back there too. Anyways, it's always Falling Knife is always a place to go in and grab a beer with happy hour friends or whatever. If you just want to hang out on the patio outside, they do have some special hours this week. Dan, the owner, sent me for the 4th and the 5th. They're open from noon to 6 on the 4th. So if you are in Minneapolis you want to go hang out on the patio on the 4th of July, go ahead and do that. And then on the 5th, which is Friday, they're staying open late. Normally it's a brewery. They close at like 10. They're going to be open from noon to midnight on the 5th. I'm sure there'll be more fireworks and stuff like that going off all around Minneapolis, and you can sit outside there. Falling Knife, longtime sponsor. This is Northeast Minneapolis. Check them out this summer at some point, and hopefully this weekend as as 4th of July is going on. We're also brought to you by the Autograph app. Like I've been telling you all, it's a place where all the Wolves content's in one place. The show, every time there's a new episode of the show, it's in there. The column Britt writes will be aggregated or wrote this morning and will publish probably later this afternoon. Will be in there. It's just a nice, easy spot. I think if you're maybe not following, the Wolves every single day, but you're tapping in every so often and you just kind of want to see what's all been going on, being speculated, free agency and everything. It's a really easy place to do that. You can scan the QR code on the screen and download the Autograph app and the App Store or Google Play Store. Use the referral code DaneMoore to let them know that you came from us. All right, Britt, let's keep rolling. I mean, we can talk more about Dillingham. I've had a chance to watch more of him. I mean, I'm right now, as people are watching can tell, I'm not at home right now. I'm on the road for 4th of July with some friends and family stuff. I haven't got a chance to watch a lot of Terrence Shannon yet, so I'm mostly going off of what I've
Terrence Shannon,
yeah,
he also fits the explosive label. I think I like you. I've seen mostly highlights, but I do think that I like somebody who has another gear near the rim, and he does seem to be able to have that. And when he goes up, he seems like again, we're watching college. I always have to remind myself, we're watching college players, and sometimes we're watching games where it's a sub 500 Big Ten team, or maybe even a MAC conference team.
Well, and he's 23 playing against a 19-year-old too. Right. So like
I should be 24 on July 30th.
See, I like. You again,
which I don't mind at all, to be honest with you.
I don't mind it either, just from a salary and a contract standpoint of like, a lot of times 24-year-olds, right? If we just do the history of it, if that's when you get into the league, there's not much room to swoon up bigger. A lot of times those guys are short-lived in the league, but he has pretty clearly some attributes, much like Dillingham, that the Wolves desire, right? And speed, a little bit more like girth defensively.
Right.
And that he'll be 24 years old, he'll be making $2.5 million, like that's a hair ahead of above the minimum. And he's been doing that for 4 years. Like, I don't know. Is that going to for sure hit? Like, is he going to for sure be a rotation player over the course of that contract? No. But if he does, man, now we're talking about like the thundery stuff. Right. Like that's like the Isaiah Joe thing. That's the Aaron Wiggins thing. And
I don't see that as bad comps.
Not at all. Yeah. Right. Like,
in terms of, like unrealistic, I don't see them as unrealistic comps either. I haven't seen enough of them on defense, quite frankly, but
I do think it's noteworthy that when we talked to Matt and Tim Connelly and Matt Lloyd after the draft, when we did media with them, what they pointed to was his size defensively.
Right.
Matt brought up in particular the Dallas series, right? And he goes, we needed another guy to guard power wings, and we think that Terrence has the ability to kind of switch and to be able to do some of that. And you go, yeah, good defensive team. That is a need. That's a need on this team, particularly if you lose Slow-Mo, which
absolutely
certainly looking like. Like there again, I haven't seen that, but Tim made it a point to highlight the playmaking of Dillingham, being like, this is the undercovered element of him. And I think Matt was pointing to the defense too. And so as I watch more, or even just, he's 6'6" without shoes.
Exactly.
And also we should say with Dillingham, it's 6'1" without shoes, so it's like, that's normal. Add 1.5 inches or 2. And that's what guys are normally listed at. Like Shannon is going to be big. He is going to be a big player. And that makes sense on this team, kind of in the,
he's going to be bigger than Taurean Prince. I think.
Yeah. Yep. I would say that's probably similar.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I'm trying to think
That's
of
a
a
good
comp to where it's like just about, he's a little bigger than Torian Prince, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
Who I think was at 6'7".
I'd have to go through. I tweeted
Yeah.
that out at some point what some of those are, but anyways, that's just like a need of this group
Right.
is another guy to be able to. Sorry, I'm vamping here to.
Well, that's
Yeah,
right.
okay. So these were the guys I found that were similar measurements at the combine to Terrence Shannon Jr. Dylan Brooks, Miles Bridges,
Wow.
Troy Brown Jr. to do a Wolf.
Uh-huh.
Kenyon Martin Jr., who's like a center and a backup center, 4 at least in the league. Sam Hauser, Corey Kispert, Jaime Jaquez. I kind of liked that one.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Right.
He's a wide body though.
Yeah. But I think Shannon kind of is too. And, so you just, I mean,
no, those
Jaime
are
Jaquez would be awesome
combo forwards. Those are legit combo forwards depending on matchups.
That maybe
in other words, you can run a small ball 4 and you can run a large ball 3 with that, that group. And I like the idea of, being able to have a 3 who is a bucket out on, I mean, when you think about last year's backup 3 was mostly slow-mo. Obviously, there were all kinds of times in the offense where he was wide open on the wing. Now, some of that obviously was purposeful. They wanted to let him be left alone.
Yeah.
But the Wolves ball movement, if this guy can hit from the outside, and, there's some indication that he can, and he's not like over 40% in college, but he can shoot from outside.
High volume, 36%. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's a good piece to have, especially if you're, folding in guys like Dillingham and you've got up-tempo guys like Nas and filtering.
Well, that's the story, right, man? And this is to the whole kind of second window idea of what the next Ant team looks like, right? It's another guy in the Nas, Jaden, now Dillingham, Shannon. I think you could put Nikhil in there.
Absolutely.
Now, what is kind of, good about this is you end up maintaining the size of that second window group, like volume of bodies, right? Because you're probably going to, I would assume you lose one of Nikhil or Nas next summer, right?
I think so.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to say more likely one way or the other, but this is, look at Denver, look at these teams. Like those are the Bruce Browns, the KCPs that.
Yeah, they are. They're just getting brutal. Right. And who else did they lose? They lost somebody else.
Reggie Jackson? Are you talking about Denver?
Yeah, Reggie Jackson. Right. Yep, that was it.
Yeah.
Their bench is stripped. I don't know. Have they signed anybody? I don't think they have.
No, I saw maybe Russell Westbrook going there.
Whew.
Yeah, but
that's all they need is Russell.
But this is the reality of the new luxury tax environment. Is you will be strip mined even of some of your own homegrown dudes or guys that you invested in and you got them on a good deal. Like obviously 10 out of 10 on the contracts they signed Nikhil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid to last summer, but
they will hold. Yeah, when they're up, both of those guys will want a bump, and can they give them a bump? It is a very good question.
So I'm just saying, even if you lose one of the young guys that contribute to your speed and athleticism and that sort of thing, okay, now can one of Dillingham or Shannon, again, a year from now, kind of re-bolster or whatever, fill out that younger group that, in time is going to take over for the old guard of probably Mike Conley at first and Rudy Gobert later down the line.
I don't know if you've probably raised this on one of the other podcasts, but have you talked about a Gobert extension at all?
I don't know really what to think about it. It is kind of.
I don't think you can do it. I'm dead serious.
Let's explain what it is right now. So he's like 43 this year, right?
Left.
43 this year, 46 next year, and next year's a player option. So what he could do is opt out of that 46 and sign an extension for my thing is like, I've heard people throw out like, just like on Twitter or whatever, like, oh, but it's fine. Like Rudy's going to opt out of that and extend, and it's going to be like 3 years, 90 million. And I'm like,
no, he's not going to take a 50% pay cut.
Yeah. I mean, eventually he's going to start to deteriorate, but not by that. And why even just economically, if we were Rudy Gobert's agent, would we say let go of 46 to add 44 over 2 years? Like that part doesn't make sense. So the extension itself, if they take that with Rudy, I would assume that'll be pretty expensive too, like
exactly why. And we just got through talking about, I mean, once you start, it's the reason why you no longer are going to see 3-star rosters is because where the money goes and really goes is in the 30 to 45 and 30 to $50 million range. I mean, when you're talking about those kind of jumps, you're talking about 3 or 4, $6 to $10 million contracts that you can throw in that roster. And if you hit on 1 or 2 of those guys, you're better off.
Well, it's even like I was thinking about that with when Hartenstein signed today, and I was like, damn, like,
but that's still less than 30 million.
Well, I was thinking about it in obviously Cat and Gobert are a lot better than Isaiah Hartenstein, but like 20, if I don't know, is Hartenstein going to be making like half as much as Cat this year? I mean, almost about half as much as Cat, and we're even being like, that's a big deal for Hartenstein. It's just these numbers are.
And that's precisely why it is so important to know your identity and figure out how to stick with it or know how to transition into it. And so would Cat or Rudy be more valuable to OKC at the exact same money Hartenstein is getting? I would say no.
I think Cat would be good in OKC.
Yeah, I don't think that he can play that kind of transition defense that they thrive on.
Yeah,
I mean, Hartenstein can run the floor.
Though, if they got him to play the dribble, drive, pass, shoot, 5 out kind of Celtic style. If Cat embrace, I mean, and
no, I get
Cat
it.
can embrace that in Minnesota too.
I am not. This isn't so much a rip on Cat, who I'm actually feeling pretty good toward lately. It is more of a praise of Hartenstein. What he did with the Knicks this year. I mean, those offensive rebounds. If OKC can get offensive rebounds, and they're going to put 2 on Shea whenever he drives, a good offensive rebounder is going to live on putbacks. And yes, Rudy is great at putbacks, but Rudy doesn't have the foot speed or the, and it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better in terms of his foot speed. I just think that Hartenstein, they got that guy and paid him a premium, but not a premium compared to best case scenario. He's pretty close to the best case scenario, and it's not best case scenario needing money. It's a value deal. And that's what teams are going to have to learn how to do, which is to bring it full circle. Why, as much as I like and have grown to enormously respect Rudy Gobert's overall game, especially on defense, especially his communication skills and the tone he sets, I think the Wolves will be transitioning out of this current Gobert-led iteration of their identity over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And so therefore, why have him on the books at $45, $50 million if that's where you're going?
Yeah, it's all just about, we talk about this second window of the young guy. We just don't know when it starts, right? And I
think it starts when they begin to not be really, that right now, this is going to be the next big ass swing at a ring. They are going to see if they can make it. And if they do, then Rudy gets his $50 million, quite frankly.
Sure.
But and there'll be money to pay it, and everything else.
Well, that's like Drew Holiday got the extension.
Exactly.
It's got to kind of be the same thing. And he's younger than Drew too, actually.
Right. So it is a situation where I am expecting that the Wolves will not win a ring next year. I think they'll be very good, and it'll be fun to watch. And I look forward to it, and I look forward to being proven wrong if that's what happens. But the point being, I do think when we were talking about contingency plans and how Dillingham fits and how Shannon fits, is the one that brought up Ant and Nas and the need to get out there and scoot, and he's smart to think that way, because I will tell you, if we think Ant is good now, wait till Ant plays up tempo.
Right.
Totally.
I mean, there's a ton of low-hanging fruit with Ant still. That is just stylish.
I mean, if Rudy Gobert is not in the lane anymore and somebody like Hartenstein is moving in and out of there.
The challenge for Ant, though, is making it work best with this, being great within this iteration. And you know what? Ant can do that. He can get out and transition more with Rudy.
Yep.
Rudy can run a little bit. I think the biggest thing Ant needs to add this year, again, in the context of Rudy Gobert roster, is like, let's start using Rudy Gobert as a lob threat, and mixing that in there. The challenge for Ant as a great player is to be great within different contexts of the team. We both think peak Ant, when he's like 27 or whatever, probably looks like a team that does not have your traditional five sitting in the dunker spot and playing drop cover.
I think Paul George and Jason Tatum, and neither one of those guys. I mean, Zubac, every now and then, but they're comfortable playing five wings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Both of those teams.
And Ant, as he needs the insulation from Rudy still defensively, and he needs the screens that create advantages for him. It's not like Rudy is holding Ant back. The question is there a better, even better iteration of Ant and roster around Ant down the line? I mean,
Rudy is deterring some aspects of Ant and opening up other aspects.
And I didn't even think that undersells it. Like the latter part. Like he's made it so Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns are starters in the number one defense in the NBA. That's a little bit more than helping out,
Yeah.
And
you're right.
But I still also agree with that. There is going to be something else, and it's just cool and we should put Leonard Miller and even maybe Josh Minot into this younger, more athletic group, archetype of player that they're kind of putting in their back pocket here for when the time comes. It's an interesting dual timeline strategy, which I think generally speaking, we've learned like kind of from the Warriors. You go, well, that wasn't a good idea. They should have approached Wiseman and Moody and Kuminga and all those assets differently. But the Wolves don't really have another option of path to go. Like the Warriors were in the middle of a dynasty and randomly got the number 2 overall, 2 and whatever, what was Moody.
And they just didn't draft well. Let's face
it. Exactly. So like the Warriors probably regret doing a dual timeline thing. The Wolves are doing a dual timeline thing because it's the only way to add anything. That goes back to draft night. You can't go sign free agents if you're the Wolves other than minimum contracts.
Right.
You can't really go make trades unless you're going to trade, Karl Anthony Towns, Jaden McDaniels, or Naz Reid, which is not something they want to do.
What we're going to see? We are going to see, this is my prediction, the Warriors are going to crumble because everybody knows that they are on the backside of that window.
Yeah.
And there isn't money. You can't spend unlimited amounts of money anymore. And so Paul George could have gone and been a Golden State Warrior next to Stephon Curry and Draymond Green if Draymond Green can be signed. But he took the sure thing. He took Joel Embiid and Maxey. That's a 3-star thing, as good as you can get it in the NBA nowadays, at least for a little while. And Paul George doesn't have a lot of years left. So, it is an interesting decision by him. I agree with it, even if I don't think that's enough to overcome the Celtics and perhaps
winning is threading needles, man. Yeah, it's like the Wolves. This is the Wolves' hole they have to thread. Yep. The Sixers have a different one when the Embiid stuff as as the Thunder are going to need to figure out how to effectively
I
thread the
don't know,
needle.
man.
Well, but like there is even
I don't know
steps
when it ends for the Thunder.
Yeah, me neither. But like at the same time, like I really respect what the Thunder are doing. I think they're a good team. I think they're probably we're going into next season.
Favorite in the West, right?
Yeah. But like they have answered. They're going to need to answer questions over time too.
And they have concerns, even with Hartenstein. You don't know. You have a lot of players.
Mm-hmm.
There does come a time where, they were a number one seed, so no one can really say they underachieved.
Yeah. With like the third best player in basketball last year.
Yeah. But I think they also had probably the best chemistry of any team in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe the Celtics, but the Celtics had so much talent, it's hard to say that. But I think that can you put more impactful talent and keep that chemistry? I think Dagnall is a great coach, and I think Shea is a pretty good superstar for that. But that's still a tough trick to pull off.
Sounds like a needle that they have to thread.
Exactly. You're right.
It's just this is building today.
Let me keep talking and I'll prove your point sooner or
later. Let's spin over to like the rest of the offseason.
All right.
For the Wolves, which is
you're going to Summer League.
I am going to Summer League. I'm still figuring
it might be interesting now.
Yeah, no, it's gonna definitely be interesting.
Yeah,
right. Matt Lloyd.
Both of them will be there, right?
Yeah, that's what when we talked to Matt Lloyd after round 2, he said Jalen Clark, Leonard Miller, Dillingham, Shannon, they're all gonna play. I have that list here.
Not Minot.
Minot's gonna play. They guaranteed his contract. Jalen Clark, Leonard Miller, Josh Minot, Dacian Nix, Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr. will all play in Summer League for the Wolves. That's
Dacian Nix,
my guy,
hanging in tough.
Ready
for the minimum.
Speaking of, 40 minutes in, did you see Luka Garza signed a contract right before you were writing right before we started this?
Did not see it.
For who?
The Wolves?
Yeah, 2 years at the minimum.
Oh, I don't get it, man.
What do you mean?
If Cat and or Rudy and or Nas get hurt, yeah, I can see it. There was a case where he was actually needed for 5 or 6 games last year. But, is it locker room stuff? Is it the fact that,
I think nobody else wants to sign him.
He certainly elevates the game of every single assistant coach he works out with because he torches them on defense, on offense.
It does, man. Listeners, go to Target Center.
Nobody is a better 2 hour before the game offensive thrill than Luka Garza.
It's like the Wolves' Steph Curry. That's what I was thinking too this morning when I heard it was a minimum. I'm like, okay, so again, if we put our agent hats on for Luka, we would probably be like, if the money's equal, maybe don't sign on the team with 4 centers or whatever. Because I think Leonard Miller's a center, but
he likes it here. And let's face it, the fan base is adoring.
That's true, and if I'm not sure. Like guarantees on both of those years. Maybe he just wants to be locked into an NBA contract rather than waiting around and maybe
it's time for him. $1 million, $2 million, whatever. That's still real money.
Yeah, man. He's old now. Same age as Terrence Shannon.
Yeah, exactly.
It's go time. But yeah, so that's I guess that was one of the looming question marks of the rest of the Wolves offseason. The more prominent ones were Kyle Anderson and Monte Morris, Jordan McLaughlin as well. They're all unrestricted free agents. It sounds like Anderson is going to be probably priced out. When we talked to Connelly, he said it was going to be depending on what the market is. They want to bring back all the guys, but he said, we'll see how the market shakes out. So it's basically like, I don't know. I would take that to be like if Kyle's going to be signing for over $10 million a year.
They can't match that.
Some of the reporting out there has been like close to the full mid-level for Kyle, which
Who's
is
interested?
I don't think I saw a team, or I haven't heard anything, but Fisher had that that the Wolves are ready to part ways with Kyle Anderson if another team is willing to offer him the mid-level exception, which makes sense within how expensive this team is, and they're, Finch will miss him if that's the case, but
Indiana could really use him.
Oh man, you know my slow-mo favorite spot.
Yeah, Denver, right?
Back up Jokic, man.
Right. I know
and
they probably have. Do they have 10 million though? They do now with Reggie Jackson gone, and
I don't think so. I don't. They might be in a tax.
Because of Porter Jr. Yeah, Porter Jr. is a big number. I was thinking both Murray and Jokic, obviously, but then Porter Jr. is a big number, right?
But I mean, I think I would assume with Kyle, he will sign with a competitive team for as much money as that can get. I wouldn't see him doing I don't know if you saw Tobias Harris went and signed with the Pistons. Like I don't think Kyle Anderson
started though, didn't he?
Yeah, actually started he was in Milwaukee for like half a season, and then he got over. Yeah, Tobias Harris has like weirdly been around for. I remember in Ricky Rubio's first game ever at Target Center. It was a preseason game against the Bucks. That was also Tobias Harris's debut.
Wow.
That tells you that was a ways.
And he's made, as the people in Philly are very well aware, made a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So
and he just signed 2-year $52. So he's
with the Pistons.
With the Pistons,
the Pistons continue to do bad things.
It's
what in the world? I mean, now to be fair, I said the same thing about Houston last year, and Houston used those fat contracts to get 41 wins. So I mean, it is possible if you have veteran leadership and those young kids begin to develop, it might work out. I mean, I have to remember
Şengün
ways they've been wrong. Yeah. That's true.
No. That would be the
rationale.
I think that's what Detroit thinks they're doing. I'm not sure that's what Detroit is doing there.
Well, they got Wendell Moore Jr. and Tobias Harris. I mean, I don't know, man. I'm beginning to look askance at the general manager.
Oh man.
And I've liked Tobias Harris in the past. I just think that he has begun to become an expensive third man on your roster.
Yeah, I don't even think he's a third man anymore. Yeah. I wish the listeners would have been there when I told you, or we were recording when I told you that Wendell Moore got traded to move back 16 places in the draft. That was a sweet all-time reaction by you in the media room. That was
I mean, I've been saying for years.
We were on. Did not pick up that option.
I memorably tweeted out during his first summer league game that he had a really good game and looks like a kind of guy who might have some value for this team. And then it all went away. I mean, it was crazy how badly things went from that point on.
Don't forget the one game where he guarded John Morant.
And that essentially that it was the peak. And that was the one where I made fun of him before the game started and had all these people, righteously saying I was screwed up on Twitter and had to concede. Hey, you're right. It was a good game.
It was a good game.
My mistake. And then it turned out, I was only temporarily mistaken.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So no, I guess Wendell wasn't a free agent, but he was another, I guess, piece of this that's no longer there.
Smart move there.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, and punting picks. I know people don't understand it, but I'll tell you, it's better than selling picks to take, to pay the rest of Kurt Rambis's contract or something. I mean, there have been worse uses of, wasting draft picks.
That 37 pick. And when we talked about the D'Lo trade, we talked about the D'Lo trade at the time. It was like, oh my God, they not only did they get Conley and Nikhil, but they also got 3 seconds on top of that. Right. And the best of the 3 seconds was 37 in the draft that they punted to get off of Wendell Moore's $2.5 million salary.
Right.
So that's
still the best deal in Timberwolves history.
Still, yes. Even though, it worked out that way.
Mike Conley and Nah, right.
Right. But I think what we know we're looking at from a Wolves perspective, bearing some sort of trade that is going to be very difficult to pull off, and it sounds like they don't even want to explore. We're looking at this team rounding out the roster with minimum contracts. Do you have a player or like a type of player that you would ideally have them, in a perfect world, you land them for the minimum and they're able to be a ninth man for you? Like what does that look like to you?
A 40% 3-point shooter, just nothing but a bucket. The Doug McDermott with a little bit better defense. Oh, have you? Okay.
I've heard Doug McDermott. I would assume.
I don't like his defense at all. I think he's a terrible defender. But again, if you're going to get a guy in ninth man who shoots over 40%, you're going to get a lot of weaknesses. But that is what I would emphasize. I would emphasize a bucket from deep.
Yep. I think that's I was thinking about this with the getting Dillingham, the bucket getter, in the draft, and we go back to the trade deadline last year. And what did we hear? What the three things the Wolves were trying to target in the draft was a movement shooter, a backup point guard, and a bucket getter. It was like, which one of those three things should we trade a couple seconds for at the deadline? They went and got the backup point guard in Monte Morris. Now they went and got the bucket getter in Dillingham, and the movement shooter one. That's the thing for me too. Now it's a minimum. Like think Austin Rivers. That's what listeners were. This is go through scroll to the bottom of the free agent list. You are getting, I always say a minimum contract player, a good minimum contract player is a player who has one NBA skill. That's what it is. And and everything else is probably a glaring weakness. And a lot of minimum players end up having lost that skill and they're still on a roster. Unfortunately, it was kind of the case with Austin. But I think that's what we're looking at. I think we're looking at a Doug McDermott type as part of the replacement plan for Kyle Anderson, which wouldn't just be McDermott. It would also be Shannon, and Dillingham is going to eat, eat some of those minutes, maybe a little bit of Minot, maybe Miller at some point. There will be some competition, I think, for the 8th and 9th.
I am curious to see. The eye test on Leonard Miller versus the statistics is really fascinating to me. That guy does not look like he can make that 3-point shot as often as he does. And he also does not look like a player that has good court vision. And yet he has pretty good court vision, and he does make a lot of those threes. So he may
feel and confidence. He has a feel and a confidence to him, even if it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah. I mean, there is something about him that, and again, I have, as Jim Peterson would always say, in Finch we trust. I am beginning to think that in Connelly we trust too, and he really liked Leonard Miller, and it's just such a funky jump shot, and he just has a stiffness to him. I mean, the way he walks, the way he bends at the waist. I mean, it doesn't look like he has the liquidity, the physical liquidity of a good NBA player. And yet, if he is in fact the 10 man, he's the 10 man who, has coordination. So
he's big too, man. Broad shoulders.
And it looks like he can be a credible 3 or 5,
I always say, those type of players, start at the 5 and then, work your way more into a perimeter type. On this team, that's probably that pathway to minutes doesn't exist. So you would probably need to work his way in as
unless, you do play 5-out teams and you want to torture somebody with rebounding and also the ability to get out there. I mean, the fact that he rebounded as well as he did in that adult G League is a takeaway,
Adult G League.
Well, as opposed to the, quasi G Leagues, the ones that are kind of like G League wannabes,
OTE? Yeah.
So, but I think that Leonard Miller, I would in a perfect world, Leonard Miller would get more minutes this coming season than Luka Garza.
Yeah, no, and I think I don't know what to necessarily make of this, but Canada has a loaded squad now, right?
And
For the
did he
Olympics.
make it anyway?
He's on there as like an alternate, and him and
Okay.
Shaden Sharp are like practicing with the team.
Hmm.
So he's not on the team, and he's
Right.
not going to be on the team there. But I think
But it
that
can't
is,
hurt, right?
there's a handful of NBA players who wanted to play for Team Canada this year in the Olympics who did not make the team. Like so I when I saw a tweet about that the other day, I'm like, Leonard is, he's practicing with the, Canadian national team, and that's a really, that's a
And
really
he's 20
good
or
group.
21 years old.
20, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, he's the one guy next year where we go that has the chance to be like, whoa,
Right.
that happened quickly, or
Right.
like all of
Right.
a sudden, and then we're laughing about, his first summer league where his jump shot, he would, tap his heels together like
Right. Like
Dorothy,
Goldilocks,
and yeah, and you're like, okay, here he is. He just needed some time to mature. Spent the whole, pretty much the whole year with the big club. Played a little bit in Iowa last year, but has kind of been incubating. Like, I think one of these guys, particularly if they do lose Slow-Mo and Monte, there's going to need to be a couple bodies, between Dillingham, Shannon, Minot, Miller, maybe a McDermott, or somebody like that are going to need to not only for sure play during the regular season, at least in like the Troy Brown Jr. type role, right? Or amount of
by the
minutes.
way, I think I read something where he was cut.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate him on the minimum. I mean, that's McDermott, but better.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
If you got a handful of minimum contract offers out there, you're probably not taking the one from the team that traded you at the deadline, but it's a possibility. I don't know.
And also, I mean, it won't be the Lakers because they just drafted Connect or whatever his name is there. So
yeah,
same prototype.
Right. Yeah. The shooter type. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that's what I'm on to with the Wolves, from the bottom of the minimum barrel. And maybe like, when you are a top 4 team in the league, the minimums you pull out are normally a little bit better than, the days of like, I don't know, Austin Rivers, Brandon Rush, like those sort of the minimum contract, Bryn Forbes, like those kind of guys that we've seen over the years. So I think that is important, but still it's probably going to be around that McDermott, Troy Brown Jr. Level of player. And they could use it, like literally just a guy, even if it's just the regular season, let's have you in the corner and let's hit these when the kickouts
one of the things that I think it was John's column on, when Matt Walsh was talking about, and you were there for that, Matt Walsh, Matt Lloyd, Matt Lloyd, is Connelly's connections around the league. And if he is as well connected as people say he is, and I have no reason to doubt it, he's a chatty guy. He seems like a natural networker.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of when that stuff pays off, is when hey, this guy was a 12th man and became like a 9th man. And right now he's kind of out right now and he's looking for a home. What can you give him or something? I mean, I think that's usually the way that kind of roster acquisition works. Whether
that's
it's
like Isaiah Joe with the Thunder,
who hit the jackpot, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That's what your hope is, that Tim Connelly and Matt Lloyd and crew can be finding, that guy.
That's right.
And it'd be like what Dacian Nix was last year, but it actually materialized into something.
Right.
Like they need to take a lot of like lottery tickets on guys like that to be able to find it, because there's such limited other ways to be able to add to this roster. Though they need it seems they're going to need to have a couple of those guys are going to play. I think, or at least be competing against Miller and Minot and them. You're talking about Conley there, and you sent me your column a little bit before, but we both, and maybe we wrap on this, but we both left Conley's post-media press conference and walked back in the media room, and we're like, okay, like Tim's kind of feeling himself a little bit.
Right.
And when he typically kind of has that aw shucks sort of, or has when we've interviewed him in the past, it was an interesting change. And you wrote in your column about just the sort of position of power that he's in and the track record of having made a handful of really impressive trades,
right?
Even in the short time he's been here, and creative sort of feels like the Dillingham move
is unprecedented. I mean, first of all, the column basically was structured around the idea that in 2 years, what's incredible is he's only been here like a smidgen over 2 years. Yeah. And it was 2 years ago today that Rudy Gobert trade happened.
I know we did the Rudy pod at your house.
It's just so amazing that was 2 years ago, because in basketball that feels like 2 or 3 lifetimes ago. But that trade, the fact that he held fast to that trade against all pressure and snickering, and a lot of smug people didn't like it. That turned out to be, I remember when we did that pod 2 years ago, what would define success? And we said a trip to the conference finals. Yep. And so there it is, that's happened in 2 years. So that, I think, qualifies as a brilliant move, because it was gutsy, it was against the grain, and it paid off, regardless of how the next 2 years pan out.
But it still has the opportunity to pay off more.
Exactly. And then the second one was the Conley-Nah trade. Right. You dumped D'Lo, who was like Gobert, I call it his emotional nemesis, which a line I actually liked, because he is a nemesis emotionally to a lot of people in that locker room. I mean, he was not a positive force. And he's also a streaky shooter. Anyway, on addition by subtraction, but that doesn't even if he had been very good, you got the perfect guy. You got the guy who can relate and is cherished by Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert. How many players could you realistically say that about, in terms of like to the extent to which Gobert and Ant rely on Mike Conley to facilitate their game is extraordinary. And the fact that he took the hometown discount for the last 2 years, probably of his career, and then you got Nah as a throw-in, who immediately just needed somebody to buff him up, just needed somebody to say, hey, you're going to be a good player. You just stay with it. The guy just needed a little, confidence. And the fact that Finch was his coach, had him as a rookie, like all the time, had guys like Conley and Ant who are pump you up teammates, he's thrived. So D'Lo for Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I did a column for MinPost last year about the best and worst trades in franchise history, and that was the best trade I saw. There isn't a better trade in Timberwolves history. So that's the second moment of brilliance. And then while casting some aspersions on Dillingham's upside,
I was going to let that one slide.
Josh Willingham, he's hitter for the Twins at one point. But having
no, he wasn't. Wasn't it Josh Donaldson?
No, that's another one. But there is a Josh Willingham.
Okay, now I'm out of my depth. Yeah. All right, continue.
That's precisely why I'm in this predicament.
Continue on Willingham.
I got way too many names in my past.
That's true. Do you remember what you're talking about?
No, probably not. Oh, no, I do. It was brilliant because of the way it was executed. Yep. It was you're trading somebody in 2031. I mean, in 2031, I could think we just talked about Gobert being 2 years ago. That's more than 3 times the amount of time Gobert has been on the Wolves that they have before they get rid of this draft pick.
Okay. It is, though. I know. And if I just see one more person like say that,
the
they
11-year-old
traded him for an 11-year-old. You're right. That's a long ways away.
Right.
It is an asset that they could have used on something else.
Yes,
in a trade.
that's true.
That's true. And I like what
but the timing
2031 for the 8th overall pick, that's great. But it could have been used like at the deadline or today. You'd be like, all right, what does Cat plus the 2031 unprotected first get you, or whatever,
totally
down the line.
Agree with all of that.
Okay.
But the idea that it was used in that specific circumstance was a total ambush. I mean, it was anybody associated with this team was thinking, all right, what are they going to do? They're going to probably package 27 and 37 and try to move down, or they're going up. Well, either way, however you want to call it, further up in the draft, right? Or you're going to have a situation where you're going to try to convince ownership to re-sign Slow-Mo and or whatever. And these are going to be your ways of sustaining. Mm-hmm. Well, they got younger. They put that second window into greater play. And if to hear, Tim Connelly tell it, they got a stud, They got a guy who should have been a top 2 or 3 pick at 8 for nothing, So that, while I don't buy the ceiling that Connelly is presenting for Dillingham, what I do buy is that this gets a fan base that's looking at steep ticket prices. Mm-hmm. The word, hey, if you buy this, you're not going to be getting a 38-win team, because this team is kind of sitting there hoping to have lightning strike twice. They're proactively trying to get better. You're sending the message to the rest of your roster, hey, that second unit is going to be a different kind of second unit. We're going to have a personality tweak, hopefully keeping what we have, but it's going to be a dynamic injection into what the status quo is. I think for the cost of that, and for the potential impact of that, and for the residual catalytic, the catalyst idea that you catalyze the veterans who want a little jolt, you catalyze the fan base, you catalyze guys like Leonard Miller and Minot, who all of a sudden have at least 1 and perhaps 2 more bodies to get over, to get playing time. You inject a feeling, and then you get guys like Mike Conley, who has a new guy to mentor and as a guy, legitimately a mentorship guy for the first time in his career, where you go, well, Ant will mentor him. It isn't like something where you just say, oh, look at how Ant has taken Jaden and helped him out. It's going to be something where, Ant, you're going to really help this guy Dillingham. So for all of those reasons, I regard this as the third moment of brilliance in Tim Connelly's Wolves tenure.
You know what I would add too, as moments of brilliance, being brilliant, even if that's maybe a little hyperbolic, is the moves that Tim Connelly hasn't made over the last 2 years.
Didn't give up on Gobert.
Well, I would even go back to D'Lo. Like, there was a push to have him be moved and get rid of him right that summer, and they rolled it out for the first season.
Right.
And that was
they did try to trade him, but they weren't getting the feelers that they needed.
They were not getting Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker in 3 seconds offers for D'Angelo Russell, and they waited, and everyone seemed to hate D'Lo that year. He was actually kind of good in the
He had some really good, he had some really good stretches, especially when he was off the ball. And and Slow-Mo was feeding him, and that whole thing happened.
And so by being patient there and not making a move like that, ended up allowing the opportunity to make what you're calling the best trade in in franchise history. Yep. I would also say Cat last summer. I don't think there was a big. I think it was a similar situation. Obviously, there was nowhere near the agitations to trade Carl anywhere to the degree that there were D'Lo. But obviously, it's on the Supermax and go back 12 months. The questions about fit with him and Gobert.
Yep.
History of injury.
One or the other. Yeah. Do you trade Gobert or Cat? Right.
Sure. And either of those, the proposition of trading away either of them is significantly better than it was 12 months ago. And
the signing of Nas, just saying, hey, screw it.
Yeah, totally. Right. And being,
we're going to add another big, what the hell?
And he's going to play the wing this year. And they not only made that work, but it kind of contributed to the dynamism of what this team was last season. So yeah, I mean, I guess to wrap it, like, I get why Tim Connelly was feeling himself a little bit. Like,
exactly.
He's been playing the board game well too. Like,
and that's, what I liked about that whole idea is that when any of us do the thing we do best at its best, it's a fucking blast. It is something to be savored and cherished. And, I know when I write a great column, I'm a really nice person to be around for the rest of that day, and Robbie notices it immediately. My wife notices it immediately, but we're not supposed to overtly savor our brilliance in that particular time. And everybody has a level of brilliance in them. Everybody has something they do really well that they really enjoy doing well more than anything else. And when those two things match up, when you have your thing going well, it isn't. The only thing I worry about is ruining my karma on it and being smoked down by it somehow. But and somebody else might, the more religious among us might think it's, blasphemy, not giving all credit to their Lord or whatever. But I happen to think,
I think you're all right to celebrate your columns without reaping damnation.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I do think there is a reflex toward humility.
Yeah.
That the charlatans in the religious world fake. But there are true believers that kind of throw a little bit too much shade on themselves by not faking and refusing to accept the fact, hey, you did something great and you're great at it. And that's what life is all about, man. And it was just a fun way to get into the Tim Connelly thing for me in that column because, as usual, I'm kind of writing late on the idea of Tim Connelly and Dillingham. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to take a perspective that was a little bit fresher and also look at, his history in a time capsule. And I do think that feeling himself, you're actually the one you said in the media room afterwards, I think Tim was really feeling himself that day. And I agree with you 100% on that. And I remembered you said that and I thought, but that wasn't a bad thing that he, that he should have been feeling himself. So that's where I went with
because he doesn't, and I don't mean this as a way to rip on Rosas, but Rosas was always feeling himself.
Yeah, well,
Rosas, in his press conference, like he always had that demeanor of what they were doing. Maybe that's him calling you right now. The landline.
You mentioned my name. I'm glad to hear it. I've got a special Twitter feed that lets me know.
Oh no, that's actually our hotel phone.
I know.
Oh my, yeah.
Probably time to check out.
No, it literally is. So I need to wrap this up. But that is a good thing for us to have. I think acknowledged about Conley in what he was able to do, because I don't think trading a pick 7 years out for the 8th overall pick or anything like that has ever happened before.
And they needed something. They needed, if they went into free agency with a meh draft pick as their thing, there would be a lot of buzz about what are they going to do. And if they lost Slow-Mo and maybe sign Morris or maybe not, and they're still up against the cap with the same cast back.
Totally.
it's a different.
Yeah. What if Monte and Kyle are gone and all you leave the draft with is Terrence Shannon?
Right.
That
then
you got a thin bench.
And
you look at the rest of the West and you go, and now you start stacking look at yourself against OKC and you go, yeah, they got better and we didn't.
And so I do think that Connelly was selling Dillingham, but he was also giddy on his own brilliance. And there's nothing wrong with that, as I just said.
Look at that giddy.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Britt, this was good. I do need to check out of my hotel room here. Will your column be up today or on Friday?
Probably tomorrow,
Tuesday morning.
But we'll see.
Yeah, no, it was a good, just kind of, for readers to, particularly if you're kind of dipping in and out of following along with the Wolves, kind of a roundup of what's been going on in Wolves world over the last, I guess, 8 days or something since the draft. Also, Finch signing an extension. You wrote about that a little bit in your and one piece there. So I'm always checking those out over at MimPost. Help them out in supporting Britt's work there as well. It's good stuff, and I'm not really sure, just for listeners from a podcast standpoint going forward. I'm on the road here for the week for 4th of July with very spotty internet abilities here in Montana. So we'll kind of figure it out as it goes. Not going to do any sort of emergency podcast for like a Monte Morris re-signing or anything, but at some point, whether it's me and Kyle or me and Britt or Jace, Chris, whatever, we'll loop back in and keep things going. But if this is the only pod for the week, you know why. It's because I'm on the road. But Britt, appreciate you doing it. And yep, everyone check out Britt's stuff over there at MimPost on Tuesday morning. And until whenever the next pod is, he's Britt, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Grinning hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.